The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between three ancient star systems. It was the heart of galactic civilization and home to the Grand Council that governed over 200 species across the known galaxy. Today the station buzzed with unusual activity because the council had gathered to judge whether a young species called humans deserved to join their ancient alliance. Ambassador of the hegemony walked through the curved corridors of the council chamber with slow and deliberate steps. His four eyes moved constantly as he observed the delegates from dozens of worlds taking their seats in the great amphitheater. Was old even by standards, and he had seen many species come before the council seeking membership. Most of them failed to impress him, and he expected today would be no different. High Curator of the Archon Collective glided into position beside him. Her body was made of living crystal that shifted through soft colors as she moved. She was considered one of the beings in the council, and her opinion carried great weight in matters of new membership. "They are late," observed in her melodic voice. "The humans were expected to arrive nearly an hour ago. Perhaps they have decided not to come." Made a clicking sound with his mandibles that passed for laughter among his kind. "More likely their primitive ships have broken down somewhere between here and their little corner of space. I have read the assessment reports on their technology. They only discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. That is barely a heartbeat in the life of the galaxy." Flickered with gentle amusement. "You seem to have already made your decision about them." "I have studied the facts," replied. "The humans control perhaps 40 warships in their entire fleet. Their vessels are crude constructions of metal and basic energy systems. They have no significant resources and no powerful allies. They are asking to sit at the table with species that have ruled the stars for thousands of years. It is almost insulting." Across the chamber, commander of the Federation was having a similar conversation with his young aide. Was a reptilian being covered in iridescent scales that changed color based on his mood. Right now, they showed the pale blue of mild boredom. "I encountered human traders near the Rim territories last cycle," said. "They are a stubborn species and surprisingly clever for such young beings, but their military power is negligible. I do not understand why the council even agreed to hear their petition." His aide consulted a data tablet. The records show that a faction within the Elder Council pushed for this hearing. They seem to believe the humans have some quality worth examining. Snorted. "The elders find everything interesting. They have lived so long that they seek entertainment in the strangest places. No doubt they expect the humans to provide some brief amusement before their petition is rejected." High above the main floor of the chamber, there was a separate platform where the sentinel observers sat in eternal silence. These beings were the oldest known species in the galaxy, and they had watched civilizations rise and fall for over 12,000 years. They never spoke during council proceedings and never voted on any matter. They simply observed and recorded everything for purposes that no younger species fully understood. The first witness was the eldest among them, and today something unusual stirred in his ancient mind. He had been watching the sensor feeds from the outer perimeter of the station, and what he saw there made him pay attention for the first time in many centuries. The announcement system chimed throughout the chamber. "Honored delegates, the human diplomatic vessel has entered sensor range. It will arrive at docking platform 7 in approximately 15 standard minutes." Finally muttered, "Let us see what manner of ship these newcomers have sent to represent their species. I expect it will be something small and unimpressive." Directed her attention to the large observation screens that dominated one wall of the chamber. The screens flickered to life, showing the space beyond the station where the human vessel would soon appear. Several delegates leaned forward in their seats with mild curiosity. Others continued their private conversations without much interest. A sensor technician frowned at his console. "Ambassador, I am detecting an unusual energy signature from the approaching vessel. The readings do not match any human ship in our database. Waved a dismissive hand. Their technology is primitive and inconsistent. Your sensors are probably confused by some malfunction in their drive systems. But the technician continued to study his readings with growing concern. Sir, the mass displacement is also incorrect. The diplomatic shuttle we were expecting should register at approximately 800 metric tons. This vessel is reading at something much larger. How much larger? Asked with the first hint of interest. The technician ran the calculations again, because he could not believe them the first time. Sir, the approaching vessel appears to have a mass displacement of over 40 million metric tons. Silence spread through the chamber like a wave. Delegates stopped their conversations and turned to look at the observation screens. Even the normally stoic Sentinel observers seemed to shift their attention toward the displays. That is impossible, Commander said. No species builds single vessels of that size. The resource requirements alone would be astronomical. High Curator moved closer to the screens, and her crystalline form flickered with rapid pulses of light that indicated deep thought. The sensors are confirmed accurate. I am receiving data from 12 independent arrays around the station. They all show the same readings. On the main screen, a shape began to emerge from the darkness of space. At first, it was just a shadow against the distant stars, but as it drew closer, it began to take form. The shape was long and angular with a hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapons emplacements studded its surface like the spines of some massive predator. The chamber fell completely silent as the true scale of the vessel became apparent. It was not a diplomatic shuttle. It was not even a warship by any standard definition they knew. It was something else entirely. Something that made every species in that chamber suddenly feel very small and very vulnerable. "What have the humans sent us?" whispered, and for the first time in his long life there was fear in his voice. The first witness rose from his seat on the Sentinel platform. In 12,000 years of recorded history, he had never stood during a council proceeding. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at him, but he did not speak. He simply watched the screens as the human vessel continued its approach, and in his ancient mind, he recognized something that the younger species had not yet understood. Everything was about to change. Captain Samuel Price stood on the bridge of the USS Valor with his hands clasped behind his back. Through the massive forward viewports, he could see Nexus Prime growing larger with each passing moment. The station was beautiful in its own alien way, with countless spires and docking arms extending outward like the petals of some enormous metal flower. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds were docked along its many platforms, but none of them came close to matching the size of the vessel he commanded. The Valor was a Titan-class dreadnought, and she was the pride of the United Earth Navy. At nearly 3 kilometers in length, she was the largest warship humanity had ever constructed. Her hull was covered in adaptive plating that could shift its composition to confuse enemy sensors and resist different types of weapons fire. Dozens of heavy plasma cannons lined her flanks, and her forward section housed the main spinal weapon that could crack a small moon in half with a single shot. "Captain on deck," announced Lieutenant Moore from the tactical station. Price settled into the command chair and let his eyes sweep across the busy bridge. Every station was manned by officers who had trained for years to serve aboard this vessel. They were the best humanity had to offer, and Price trusted each of them with his life. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Harper approached with a data tablet in his hands. "Sir, we have cleared the final translation point. Nexus Prime is broadcasting standard approach vectors, but I am detecting a significant increase in communication traffic from the station." Price allowed himself a small smile. They were not expecting us. The council invited a diplomatic shuttle called the Harmony. Admiral decided that our entrance to the galactic community deserved something more memorable. Harper nodded slowly. "Sir, their sensors are having difficulty reading our signature. The adaptive hull plating is giving them fits. I count at least 30 different scanning beams trying to lock onto our systems. Let them look, Price replied. By the time they figure out what they are seeing, we will already be at the diplomatic platform. Navigation Officer Christopher Grant looked up from his console. Course is plotted, Captain. I have us passing through the main observation corridor on approach to Platform 7. Every species on that station will have a clear view of us as we come in. Price considered this for a moment and then nodded his approval. Standard approach speed. There is no need to rush. The Valor began her final approach, and her massive engines pushed her forward with smooth and steady power. On the station, thousands of beings rushed to observation windows and viewports to watch the impossible ship glide past. Many of them had never seen a human vessel before. None of them had ever imagined that humans could build something like this. In the crew quarters below the main bridge, Ambassador Mitchell was preparing for the most important presentation of his career. He was a tall man in his early 50s, with gray at his temples and calm, steady eyes that had seen many difficult negotiations. Before becoming a diplomat, he had served 20 years in the Earth Defense Forces, rising to the rank of colonel before transitioning to civilian service. His aide-lieutenant entered the quarters with a concerned expression. Ambassador, we are receiving urgent communications from the station. Multiple governments are demanding information about the Valor and her capabilities. Some of them sound rather upset. Mitchell continued adjusting his formal uniform without looking up. Let them be upset. Captain Price and Admiral knew exactly what they were doing when they sent this ship instead of the Harmony. Hesitated before speaking again. Sir, do you think this was wise? We came here to ask for membership in their alliance. Arriving in the largest warship in our fleet might send the wrong message. Mitchell turned to face her, and his expression was patient but firm. What message do you think we have been sending them for the past 2 centuries? They have watched our civilian traders and our research stations. They have seen our small patrol ships and our unarmed exploration vessels. They have concluded that humanity is weak and insignificant and not worth taking seriously. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the approaching station. Today they learn the truth. We are not beggars asking for scraps from their table. We are not children hopping to be adopted by more advanced species. We are a civilization that has built the power to defend itself against any threat in this galaxy. We come to them as equals, offering partnership and mutual benefit. Absorbed his words in silence for a moment. And if they see us as a threat instead of a partner, then we will know where we stand with them, Mitchell replied simply. Better to know the truth now than to be surprised later. On the bridge, Captain Price watched the station grow larger through the viewports. His thoughts drifted back to the early days of human expansion, when every alien encounter had been a gamble. Some species had been friendly and curious about the newcomers from Earth. Others had been hostile and predatory, seeing humans as easy prey to be conquered or enslaved. Humanity had learned hard lessons in those early years. They learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place and that survival required strength. They learned that no one would protect them except themselves. And so they built. They constructed shipyards and weapons factories. They trained soldiers and developed new technologies. They turned their civilization into a fortress that could withstand any attack. The Valor was the ultimate expression of that philosophy. She was not just a warship. She was a statement. She told the galaxy that humanity would not be intimidated or bullied or dismissed. She told every species that looked upon her that humans had earned their place among the stars through blood and determination, and an absolute refusal to surrender. Sir, we are approaching the observation corridor, Harper reported. All external sensors show multiple scanning attempts from the station. They still cannot get a clear reading on our systems. Price nodded with satisfaction. The adaptive hull plating was working exactly as designed. Maintain course and speed. Let them get a good long look at what humanity can build when we put our minds to it. The Valor glided through the observation corridor, and her shadow fell across the windows of the station like a passing eclipse. Inside those windows, thousands of alien beings stood frozen in place watching the impossible ship pass by. Mandibles hung open, and scales went pale, and crystalline forms flickered with confusion. No one spoke because no one could find words for what they were seeing. On the bridge of the Valor, Captain Price allowed himself a moment of pride. Humanity had come a long way from the small blue planet where they had been born. Today the galaxy would learn just how far. "Take us in," he commanded quietly. "Our ambassador has a presentation to deliver." The council chamber had descended into chaos. Delegates who had spent centuries maintaining careful composure were now shouting over each other in a dozen different languages. Ambassador was demanding immediate answers from his intelligence staff, while Commander argued loudly with a group of military advisors. Only High Curator remained still, as her crystalline form processed the impossible data flowing across her sensors. 3 kilometers, she said quietly, but her voice carried across the chamber and silenced the noise around her. The human vessel is 3 kilometers in length. Its mass displacement suggests armor plating of a density we have never encountered. The weapon systems I can detect number in the hundreds, and there appear to be sections of the hull that are actively blocking our scans. Turned his 4 eyes toward her. How is this possible? Our intelligence reports indicated the humans possessed only primitive technology. They should not be capable of building something like this. Your intelligence reports were clearly incomplete, said a voice that made everyone in the chamber freeze. The first witness had descended from the Sentinel platform and now stood among the delegates for the first time in recorded history. His form was ancient beyond comprehension and seemed to shift between states of matter as he moved. The younger species could not look directly at him for long without feeling dizzy. "You have been observing the humans for 200 years, the first witness continued. "You sent your scouts and your spies to watch their colonies and their trade routes. You cataloged their civilian vessels and their small patrol ships, and you concluded that they were weak and insignificant." "That is what the evidence suggested," replied defensively. The first witness made a sound that might have been laughter. "You saw what they wanted you to see. The humans learned very early that revealing their true capabilities to unknown powers was dangerous, so they hid their strength. They showed you farmers and merchants and scientists. They kept their warriors out of sight." Commander stepped forward with his scales flickering between colors of confusion and alarm. "First witness, you are saying the humans deliberately deceived us." "I am saying the humans are survivors." The first witness turned to look at the observation screens, where the Valor was now entering the final approach to the docking platform. "In my 12,000 years of watching civilizations, I have seen many species rise from their birth worlds. Most of them follow predictable patterns. They discover technology and they expand outward and they encounter other species. When they meet resistance, they either fight or they submit. The outcome depends on their strength relative to their opponents." "And the humans asked?" "The humans are different." The first witness paused as if choosing his words carefully. "When they first ventured beyond their home world, they encountered species that saw them as prey. Pirates raided their colonies. Slavers captured their people. Hostile empires demanded tribute and obedience. Any other young species would have been crushed by such opposition. But the humans were not crushed," said slowly. "No," the first witness turned to face the assembled delegates. "The humans did something that we have rarely seen in all hour of observation. They learned. Every defeat taught them new lessons. Every loss made them stronger. They studied their enemies and adapted their tactics. They built better ships and developed more powerful weapons. They turned themselves from prey into predators." The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate hung on the words of the ancient being who had never before shared such insights. "That vessel approaching your station is not an anomaly," the first witness continued. "It is the product of 2 centuries of relentless development. The humans have been preparing for the day when they would face the full power of the galactic community. They have been building an arsenal that can stand against any threat. Found his voice again. Then they are a danger to us all. We should deny their petition and contain them before they become too powerful. The first witness fixed his attention on the ambassador, and something in his gaze made take a step backward. You still do not understand. Look at that ship. Study its design. Tell me what you see. Moved closer to the screens and let her crystalline senses analyze the Valor in detail. The weapons are formidable, but they are primarily forward-facing. The defensive systems are layered and redundant. The power distribution suggests the ship is designed to absorb tremendous damage while continuing to function. She paused as understanding began to dawn in her ancient mind. This is not a ship built for conquest. This is a ship built for defense, for survival. The first witness nodded slowly. The humans have faced enemies on all sides since they first left their world. They have fought pirates and slavers and hostile empires. They have defended their colonies against raiders and their trade routes against predators. And through all of that, they have never once initiated a war of conquest. Never, repeated with disbelief. Never. The first witness let that word hang in the air. The humans build their weapons to protect what they have built. They train their soldiers to defend their people. They have created a military force capable of devastating any opponent, but they have never used that force for aggression, only for survival. Then why are they here? Demanded. Why come before the council with such a display of power if not to intimidate us? The first witness turned once more to the screens, because they are tired of hiding. They are tired of being dismissed as primitives and weaklings. They have earned their place among the stars through sacrifice and determination, and they have come here to claim it. On the screens, the USS Valor had reached the docking platform. Massive clamps extended to secure the vessel and umbilical connections began to attach. The ship was motionless now, but its presence dominated everything around it like a sleeping giant that might wake at any moment. The humans are asking to join your alliance, the first witness said quietly. I suggest you consider their request very carefully. They would make powerful friends. They would make devastating enemies. The choice of which they become is yours to make. With those words, he began to drift back toward the Sentinel platform, leaving behind a chamber full of beings who were only just beginning to understand what humanity truly represented. Captain Samuel Price stood at the forward observation deck of the Valor, watching the docking procedures through the reinforced viewport. The station's mechanical arms looked almost delicate as they secured themselves to the massive hull of his ship. He could see movement behind the windows of the nearby station modules as alien beings gathered to stare at the vessel that had disrupted their orderly universe. Ambassador Mitchell entered the observation deck with his small delegation following close behind. There were 7 of them in total, and each one had been carefully selected for this mission. Lieutenant carried the diplomatic credentials. Commander Gregory handled security. The others were specialists in alien relations and cultural protocols. All of them had served in the military before transitioning to diplomatic service. Samuel, Mitchell said as he approached the captain, I have been receiving reports from our communication officers. The station is in an uproar. At least 30 different governments have demanded immediate explanations about the Valor. Price turned to face the ambassador with a calm expression. And how are you planning to respond? Mitchell smiled slightly. I am planning to walk into their council chamber and give them something to really think about. But first, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. The Harmony would have delivered us safely, but it would not have delivered the message that needed to be sent. Price nodded slowly. Admiral and I discussed this at length before we departed Earth. The galactic community has been watching humanity for 2 centuries. They have made assumptions about our capabilities and our character. Those assumptions are wrong, and it was time to correct them. Commander stepped forward. Captain, I have been monitoring the station's internal communications. There is significant debate happening in the council chamber. Some delegates are calling for immediate containment measures against humanity. Others are urging caution. Price raised an eyebrow. Containment measures. Nodded grimly. Ambassador of the hegemony is particularly vocal. He seems to believe the valor represents a threat that must be neutralized before humanity grows any stronger. Mitchell exchanged a glance with Price. Then it seems our timing was perfect. If we had arrived in the Harmony, they would have dismissed us without a second thought. Now they are forced to take us seriously, even if that makes some of them uncomfortable. Price walked to a different viewport that offered a view of the station's main structure. Thousands of lights glittered across its surface, marking the habitation modules and commercial districts where millions of beings lived and worked. It was an impressive achievement of engineering and cooperation between species that had once been strangers to each other. Ambassador, Price said quietly, there is something I want you to understand before you go in there. The Valor is an impressive ship. She represents the peak of human military technology, but she is just one ship. If the Council decides that humanity is a threat, they have the resources to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Mitchell nodded. I am aware of that, Captain, but I am also aware that the Council does not want a war with anyone. They have built this alliance through diplomacy and mutual benefit. Violence is a last resort for them, not a first option. Let us hope you are right, Price replied. On the station, High Curator had withdrawn to a private chamber to process everything she had learned. Her crystalline form pulsed with activity as she ran calculations and reviewed historical records. The first witness had given them much to consider, and she found herself examining humanity through new eyes. A chime indicated that someone was requesting entry. She adjusted her form to a more formal configuration and signaled the door to open. Commander of the Federation stepped inside looking troubled. High Curator, he said with a respectful bow, I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, Commander. I suspect you have come to discuss the humans. Scales shifted to a muted gray that indicated uncertainty. I have been reviewing our military intelligence on human capabilities. Everything we thought we knew appears to be wrong. That ship out there represents technology that should have taken them another 3 centuries to develop. Flickered thoughtfully. The first witness suggested that the humans have been hiding their true strength from us. That implies a level of strategic thinking that we did not expect from such a young species. It implies more than that, replied. It implies that they anticipated our reaction. They knew we would underestimate them, and they used that underestimation as a shield while they built their real power in secret. A wise strategy, observed. A terrifying strategy. Began to pace the small chamber. High Curator, I have commanded warships for over 200 years. I have fought in 3 major conflicts and dozens of smaller engagements. I know how to read an opponent. And everything I see in the humans tells me they are dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Asked quietly. Stopped packing and looked at her directly. That is what I cannot determine. The first witness claims they have never initiated a war of conquest. If that is true, then their military buildup is purely defensive. But how can we be certain? How do we know they will not use that power against us once they have what they want? Let silence fill the room for a long moment before responding. Commander, I have lived for over 4,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves through war and greed and fear. In all that time, I have learned one truth that applies to every civilization I have encountered. Waited for her to continue. Power does not corrupt, said. Power reveals. A species that builds strength for protection will use that strength for protection. A species that builds strength for conquest will use that strength for conquest. The question we must answer is not whether the humans are powerful. The question is what kind of species they truly are. And how do we answer that question? Asked. by listening to what they have to say, replied, "The ambassador will address the council soon. Let us hear his words before we make our judgments." In the docking corridor, Ambassador Mitchell and his delegation had begun their walk toward the council chamber. Station security officers flanked them at a respectful distance, and curious civilians pressed against barriers to catch a glimpse of the humans who had arrived in such dramatic fashion. Mitchell kept his pace steady and his expression calm. He had prepared for this moment his entire career. Whatever happened in that chamber would determine the future of humanity among the stars. The doors to the council chamber parted with a soft hiss, and Ambassador Mitchell stepped through into the largest gathering of alien species humanity had ever faced. The amphitheater stretched upward in concentric rings of seats and platforms, where delegates from 200 worlds watched his approach with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility to something that looked remarkably like fear. Mitchell walked with measured steps toward the central speaking platform. His delegation followed in precise formation, and their footsteps echoed through the sudden silence that had fallen over the chamber. Every eye and sensor and perception organ tracked their movement as they crossed the polished floor. High Curator spoke first. "Ambassador Mitchell, you represent the United Earth government in this petition for associate membership in the Galactic Concord. Before you deliver your formal presentation, the Council has questions regarding the vessel that delivered you to this station." Mitchell inclined his head respectfully. "I would be happy to address any concerns." Ambassador rose from his seat, and his 4 eyes blazed with barely contained anger. "The ship you arrived in is not the diplomatic shuttle we were expecting. It is a warship of unprecedented size and power. You have brought a weapon of war to our doorstep, and you expect us to welcome you as friends." Mitchell met the ambassador's gaze without flinching. "The USS Valor is indeed a warship, Ambassador. She is one of 12 Titan-class dreadnoughts currently in active service in the United Earth Navy. We also maintain 37 battlecruisers and 122 destroyers, along with approximately 400 support vessels of various classifications." The numbers rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Delegates turned to their aides with urgent whispers, and several began accessing their communication devices to relay this information to their home governments. "You claim to possess only 40 combat vessels," accused. "Your representatives told us that your military capabilities were minimal." "Our representatives told you that we had 40 vessels assigned to patrol duties in sectors where your observation networks could monitor them," Mitchell replied calmly. "The remainder of our fleet operates in territories you do not watch. We learned early in our expansion that revealing our full strength to unknown powers was strategically unwise." Commander stood, and his scales had shifted to a deep red that indicated alarm. "Ambassador, you are describing a deliberate campaign of deception. How can we trust anything you tell us now?" Mitchell turned to face the commander directly. "Commander, when humanity first ventured beyond our home world, we encountered species that saw us as prey. Our colonies were raided. Our people were captured and enslaved. We sent diplomatic missions to seek peaceful relations, and those missions were answered with violence." He paused to let his words settle over the chamber. "We learned that the galaxy was not a kind place. We learned that survival required strength. And we learned that showing our weakness to potential enemies would only invite more attacks. So yes, we hid our true capabilities. We built our strength in secret while the galaxy continued to dismiss us as primitives who posed no threat." The first witness moved forward on the Sentinel platform, and his ancient presence drew all attention. "Ambassador, I have a question that I believe speaks to the heart of this matter. Your species has demonstrated the capacity to build weapons of tremendous destructive power. You have maintained a military force far larger than any junior species in galactic history. Yet in 2 centuries of expansion, you have never initiated a single war of conquest. Why?" Mitchell considered the question carefully before answering. First witness humanity learned a painful truth in the centuries before we reached the stars. We fought wars among ourselves for thousands of years. We destroyed our cities and killed our children and brought ourselves to the edge of extinction more than once. Through all of that suffering, we learned one fundamental lesson. The chamber was completely silent, as every being waited for him to continue. War is not a path to greatness, Mitchell said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the amphitheater. War is a failure. It is what happens when wisdom runs out and diplomacy breaks down and all other options have been exhausted. We build our weapons because the galaxy has shown us that strength is necessary for survival, but we take no pride in destruction. We take no joy in violence. We would rather build than burn. We would rather create than conquer. He turned slowly to address the entire chamber. We did not come here to threaten you or intimidate you. We came here to offer partnership. Humanity has grown strong in the shadows of your civilization. We have built an arsenal that can defend against any threat we might face. And now we are ready to step out of those shadows and take our place among the stars as equals. The valor is not a warning, Mitchell continued. She is a promise. Any species that stands with humanity will never stand alone. Any threat to the galactic conquered will be met with the full force of everything we have built. We offer our strength in service of peace and prosperity for all species who share our vision of a better galaxy. Silence held the chamber for a long moment. Then High Curator rose and her crystalline form glowed with colors that the human delegates could not interpret. Ambassador Mitchell, you have given us much to consider. The Council will now debate your petition. Mitchell bowed respectfully and led his delegation to the visitor gallery, where they would wait for the verdict. Around them, the chamber erupted into urgent discussion as delegates argued over what they had heard. The first witness spoke one final time. In 12,000 years, the Sentinel observers have maintained neutrality in all council matters. We do not vote on petitions, and we do not advocate for any position, but we are permitted to offer recommendations based on our observations. Every voice in the chamber fell silent. The humans have shown us something remarkable today, the first witness continued. They have shown us a species that built the power to destroy and chose instead to offer friendship. They have shown us strength tempered by wisdom and ambition guided by restraint. In all hour of watching, we have rarely seen such qualities combined. He turned his attention to the assembled delegates. I recommend that the petition of the United Earth Government be accepted without conditions. The humans have earned their place among us. To refuse them now would be the greatest mistake this council has ever made. The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. When the final tally was announced, Ambassador Mitchell allowed himself a small smile of relief. Humanity had been accepted into the Galactic Concord. As the delegation prepared to return to the Valor, a young aide approached Mitchell in the corridor. Ambassador, may I ask you a question? Mitchell nodded, of course. Your species is so young compared to most members of the Concord. You have only been traveling among the stars for 2 centuries. How did you accomplish so much in such a short time? Mitchell glanced toward the viewport where the Valor was visible against the backdrop of stars. Her massive hull gleamed with power and purpose, and the adaptive plating shimmered faintly as it tracked the movement of nearby vessels. Because we had no choice, he said simply. The galaxy taught us that survival must be earned. We learned that lesson. We have no intention of forgetting it. He nodded politely to the aide and continued toward the docking platform. Behind him, the council chamber was still buzzing with activity as delegates absorbed the new reality of a galaxy that included humanity as a major power. The stars had not changed. The station had not moved, but everything was different now. Humanity had arrived and the galaxy would never be the same.